Happy New Year. I thought this would be a really good recap video as it was about a year ago today when we purchased a property that did need quite a bit of work. And if you did read the title, yes, it did have cockroaches before we purchased it. That of course was all remediated, but we did tear it down to the brick and did a full gut renovation. For this video, we're going to walk through different steps of that renovation to show the before and after product and really show kind of some of the details that we added throughout this process when it came to going through all these renovations. I'm curious to hear all your comments down below as we go through this process. And one of the things that I did was take tons of video and photos throughout the process. So if you are interested in videos like this, hit that like and subscribe button along the way. So here we go. First up is the layout. Now, one of the things when we purchased a property of this state, and if you're looking at it, maybe it doesn't look that bad. And actually it wasn't that bad, but we really cared a lot about locations. We waited for a long time for this property or for any property to come up in a specific pocket of the city. This property specifically is in that Bloor West area. That's an area that is highly desirable. We waited a long time for the location and the budget. And of course, if you've watched any of my other videos, typically the buyer triangle, pick two of three: location, price, or property. So we purchased one of the, let's call it one of the worst properties in one of the best areas and really made it our own throughout the way. Here's the main level, of course, plaster wall. The kitchen, if you're seeing, there were no appliances. There was, but we actually didn't want them. And in the backyard, you could see a bit of the back deck there. Jumping over to that next slide, here is the property fully gutted. And it's pretty incredible to see the transformation just even at this stage. At this point, the subfloor was also added in, of course. All the structural engineers, the architectural drawings, all the permits and everything were in place at this point as well, which is super important. If you are doing a renovation of this caliber, you'll want to get all the permitting done properly. Also, in another video, I talked about hiring a designer. Highly recommended too, because they generally will help you with all those processes of getting all the renderings done, but also submitting everything for the city when it comes time to getting those permits. If you take a look at, basically as mentioned, we took out all the old studs, all the old plaster. If you ever dealt with plaster walls, it's not that fun. But yeah, the plaster walls were gone here because they really don't offer much insulation value. We did love the look of the brick, even though it's an older brick in kind of different colors, but having exposed brick is pretty awesome. The only issue here is that if you're in a semi and you have obviously an exterior wall, which is brick, there is not much insulation value there whatsoever. And if you are, again, as mentioned, in a semi, you won't have any kind of sound barrier between the other house. So really, it's not an overly recommended thing to have exposed brick on the party wall, especially if it's real exposed brick. If it's the brick or shaved brick that is real, but it's only about an inch thick on top of a drywall that does have the proper sound barrier and all the proper insulation, different story. But if it's just exposed, not overly ideal. Taking a look through, you could definitely see how much wider the space looks. And this will be the eventual kitchen. This window we actually ended up taking out to add a pantry going along this wall. And the island, we actually decided to go widthwise instead of lengthwise, which was a decision that we kind of went back and forth. But lengthwise, we felt it would come too far into this area here, which would become the eventual dining room. But you can see how everything's taking shape here. What a difference once all those old plaster walls were removed. And this exposed brick here, this actually had to stay. There is some structural integrity there, but definitely way wider of a space. Once we started getting into this stage where you have the studs and the vapor barriers into place, what a difference. This is where even just having that white behind the studs there definitely brightened up the space tremendously. You can start to see the LVLs here in the top of the ceiling, which are extra beams to make sure everything is structurally sound. And then the fireplace, we love this fireplace actually. We ended up keeping this all exposed brick, even with the finished product, as you'll see in the future. But we did have to make some sacrifices on these walls because one thing you'll notice in any of these homes that are built in 1920 is they may or may not have forced air and air conditioning, and of course forced heating. So you see a lot of radiators for these level of homes or this age of home. and not a lot of central air. You'll see a good amount of ductless air conditioners. We did want to have forced air and central heating, so we did have to make some sacrifices here on the walls, which you'll see in the next video. Things are coming to shape. That window here on the left side is gone. One thing that I was really impressed with my contractors, and this is something if you are working with contractors, is they left this space super clean every single day. And it's something that I'm so grateful for, because every time I'd walk into this house, which was very often, it would be very clean. And it's such a nice way to see the property. Of course, a little bit of debris back here, not a big issue, but overall, very clean space. And again, this extension part, this is where that mudroom becomes a big factor, and of course the powder room in the future. We're about 4 months into our renovation right now. We're in Bloor West, so we took this house, we fully gutted the whole thing. It's come on quite a long ways at this point. You can see behind us here, so we did an archway right here going into the powder room. We opened up the entire space. We ran all new ductwork across the top here, and that came up beside the fireplace. Fireplace has now all been framed. When we take a look here as we go, all new windows are in, by the way, so we have all new windows, black windows, black on inside, black on outside. Kitchen has all been mapped out, and we have some renderings for there, so I'll try to add those into the video as well. And then we added this powder room and mud room here, which is something that you don't see a lot on these semis, especially in Bloor West. So this will be a powder room right here, and then a mud room out the back door. And then we're currently working on the back deck. Basement has all been framed going down, and then upstairs all the framing's been done too. It really is incredible to see the step-by-step process. And if you are doing any kind of renovations, definitely recommend taking tons of photos, tons of videos, making sure you have all this documented so you could look back and, one, remember what that process was like, but also two, you know exactly where every stud is. So when you're hanging photos, you either know where to avoid, of course, there's some ductwork here, or where the studs are so that you can actually hit them when you are hanging stuff. But definitely this was part of the project where the whole thing was really coming together. We also had to make decisions on where we wanted things like light switches, all the lighting, what controls what, any plugs we wanted to add and where. We did Cat 6 wiring throughout the house. We also, in the basement, we actually had to move the mechanical, or we wanted to move the mechanical to get the headspace. So we actually took the ductwork from the ceiling in the basement, which overall the basement's probably about 6'5" finished, but that ductwork that was in the middle of the living area brought it down to like 5'5" in that one spot. So what we did was took all the ductwork and moved it on the side wall. So we lost about a half a foot or a foot on the wall, but gained the consistent ceiling height throughout. So that was one of the biggest moves we made. Although it did end up getting us the ductwork along the fireplaces. I think it was a pretty fair sacrifice to make to get the space in the basement, and you don't even notice it now that drywall's up, which we're gonna see in a second. Having the drywall up was a total game changer, and this is where you could see the exposed brick on the fireplace. The kitchen is fully laid out. It's mapped out here on the ground. We did leave these archways, or actually we created those archways, which is something that our contractor didn't really love, but we personally love that look. So drop a comment down below actually if you do like these archways. Sometimes there are so many pot lights in these homes, so we really tried to minimize the amount of pot lights that we had throughout the house, which we feel that we actually did a pretty good job on. But then eventually we added dimmers to everything. So really having those pot lights was still a big thing. However, we do have other lights that we use pretty much most of the time regardless. The black windows was also a game changer for this home. Overall, this is the layout, and having that mudroom in the back with the exit to the backyard. But this powder room, and in Bloor West Village, you don't see a ton of them. Having that powder room there, super key as we go along. We also managed to keep that exposed brick in the powder room too. Here's everything all drywalled, and if you remember that ductwork going up on both sides of the fireplace, I know it's not the most clear video, but we did cover that up in drywall, and we ended up going with some exposed shelving here. It's the only space we kind of had, but it's still a bonus. And if you remember, there's other ductwork here and the bulkhead going across up to here. And the fireplace here, we just ended up going with an electric insert that popped in basically in the same hole that the wood burning fireplace would be. We could have probably kept the wood burning fireplace, and looking back, it would have been a pretty sweet thing to have, but we would have had to go through the entire inspection and make sure that everything within the chimney was functional. We actually capped the chimney in the end anyways. And at this point, we had also done a new roof, all new exterior, seeing all the drywall up, and we lugged all these appliances in, which we had in storage because we actually purchased them when they were on sale and then just stored them throughout the process. You see the spindles here, new railings, all completed. And railings do have different codes, so you have to stick with those. But the biggest thing here is the kitchen was now in place. So this is all the cabinetry set up, basically ready for the fabricator to come and add the countertops. Kitchen was in place and really could see the flow. Having the pantry here, but also we left some glass shelving and this exposed. Pretty big decision. We actually originally, the first drawing we had was pantry all on this wall, which would have probably been fine as well, but we do feel that it would have made this more blocked off. So now that we have this open, it's really been a positive decision that we made here. And we actually got some renderings done when the house was at its stud stage. So once we had those renderings done, it made such a difference in seeing the visual of what something could look like, because without those renderings, you're really kind of just guessing. Here's a look of the house. And if you remember in the first video, this was actually the entry to the stairs going down to the basement, but we opened it up from this side here and blocked this in so that we could add the fridge here. So we actually were able to get more space for the fridge and just had to make a landing for the stairs going down on this side here. At this point, the mudroom is also all ready to go, and we put a pocket door here so that this door was not opening into that door. One thing in the future that we would add is either get our kitchen cabinetry guy to come back and do it, or add some sort of mudroom storage. We didn't have the budget for that. Now, this is one of my favorite rooms, how it turned out in the house, and you'll see the finished result, but keeping the exposed brick here, and this was the tiling that we ended up going with for the mudroom and powder room. Floors were also in at this point, and that was a big thing. And now we had the deck. And if you've seen any of my other videos on YouTube, the shed, or on Instagram for that matter, the shed was also complete in the back. And the space, as discussed, is just under 30 inches, so it's not that tight when walking by. This is able to comfortably have 3 seats or 3 bar stools at the island. And walking through the bulkhead there, you don't really notice, and there's all of the trim work and new doors about to go into the rest of the home. Pretty awesome to see everything come together, and I'm sure at this point you want to see the finished product, so let's take a look. Here's the finished product, and I wish I took a horizontal video, but only vertical. And there was a couple things we were still missing, so they actually were supposed to make this door black, and eventually it was white, but we will get this painted black at some point. Here are the area vents. There's the hardwood flooring, 7-inch baseboards. We ended up putting an entryway light on top of where all the pot lights were. Black windows, of course. And there's those shelves. When they first created them, the fabricator actually messed one up, so he had to go back and fix it, which it is all fixed now. Fireplace is electric, and again, keeping with that brick here, we hardwired the plug up here onto the brick. So with the TV mounted, the plug will be behind. You won't even see it, and these cords are also hidden. So you actually won't see anything, and this has Cat 6 to it. So if you're thinking things like plugging in your TV for Wi-Fi, we set that up so it's actually hardwired so that it doesn't need Wi-Fi. Here is the bulkhead, which actually flows in pretty nicely. And again, those area vents. We did go with a larger dining light, and this is how everything flowed with the island going widthwise, pendant lighting, and we went with black hardware. We debated gold as well, which we think would have still looked good as well, but went with the black hardware, and this is the look. Over time, these stairs were to be painted white, and then you could see this red brick was also continued down here as well. We had to wait for the countertops to be installed before they came in and finished off this brick. This is actually, it's not a brick veneer, it's actual brick, but super, super thin. So they lay it on with mortar. It's real, but it's not as thick, so you don't lose any space there. But the look with the red was something we really wanted. Now going to the back room, and this is where we see the deck. This is the mud room. And overall, my favorite style in the home, I actually really like that we went with a dark wall. This is Kendall Charcoal Gray by Benjamin Moore. And this is, again, that exposed brick behind, which was cleaned up nicely. And we really loved how that look turned out. The pocket door, really a good setup. The appliances were just installed. And one thing I didn't know until going through this process, but the contractors don't install appliances, or in our case, they didn't. We had to hire someone, or they suggested that we hired someone to install them properly, which was an additional cost, but we're happy that they installed them properly. We do have a gas range, so having everyone connect everything, and the fridge also has a water line. So making sure that those are installed correctly, super important. And we found that they were just super efficient. They level everything out. But here's the overall look. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below on what you think, what you would have changed. And if you've done this process, any of the things that you would recommend to somebody else going along to do this as well. That was a full main level of one of the projects I took on this year for 2024. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And if this is something that you'd be interested in the city of Toronto and are looking to find a property that could fit some of these check marks of location, layout, but needs some TLC, click on that first link down below for a New Year strategy session. And let's talk about what your goals are for 2025. I'm Michael Ouzas. Happy New Year. Thanks for watching.